Pretend you're my dad for 5 minutes. Alien girl needed human to board ship. Michael sat on the edge of a worn-out bench, staring into the vast desert landscape beyond the small town of Mesa Ridge. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over everything. It was a quiet evening, the kind of peace he had come to expect after years of working at the remote outpost on Earth. Life here had been simple, uneventful. The small town was tucked away, isolated from the busy cities and bustling streets far away. Michael never thought much about the world beyond. He was a regular guy, living a regular life. His job involved repairing equipment, maintaining communication lines, and running the occasional errands for the government. Nothing special. He liked it that way, nothing ever threatened his routine. But today was different. As he sipped from his thermos, something caught his eye. At first, he thought he was imagining it, a faint movement in the shadows of the alleyway near the far corner of the building. It was barely noticeable. He squinted, unsure if it was a trick of the light or something else. Then a figure emerged. It was a girl, an alien girl, at least that's what Michael thought when he saw her. She was small, no taller than a child, with large, dark eyes that seemed to shimmer like distant stars. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with a slight blue tint that only became more noticeable as she moved closer. She wore a strange set of clothes, light and flowing, in colors he couldn't quite place. Her short hair, almost silver, shimmered in the fading sunlight, giving her an ethereal appearance. The girl looked confused, glancing around nervously as if searching for something or someone. Michael hesitated for a moment. Was she in danger? Did she need help? He stood up, his boots scraping against the gravel. Slowly, he made his way toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. The girl noticed him now, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him stop in his tracks. "I need help," she said softly, her voice clear but with an unfamiliar accent. "You need to help me." Michael blinked. "Help you with what?" She took a step forward, still keeping a cautious distance. "I need to get on the ship. You need to pretend you're my dad for 5 minutes." Michael's eyebrows furrowed. "What?" he asked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "I need to board the ship," she repeated, urgency creeping into her voice. "Please, they won't let me in without someone to vouch for me." Michael looked around. The town was quiet as usual, and there was no one else in sight. He didn't know what kind of ship she was talking about or what kind of trouble she was in. But he knew one thing: he couldn't just leave her here. "Why me?" he asked, still unsure of the situation. "You're the only one who can do it," she replied, her voice growing quieter, almost pleading. "You're human. You're the only one they'll let through." Michael thought about it for a moment. He didn't know what was going on, but something about her eyes, those strange, shimmering eyes, made him feel like this wasn't a simple mistake. She wasn't just some runaway alien. There was more to this, and he could tell she was desperate. He had no idea what he was getting himself into, but he couldn't turn away. "All right, I'll help you," he said finally, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. "Let's go." The girl's face lit up with a quick smile. "Thank you," she said, bowing her head slightly. They began walking together, Michael glancing back at the alleyway as they passed, still unsure of what kind of trouble they were stepping into. The girl moved quickly, leading the way down a narrow path that Michael had never noticed before. He followed her, trying to keep up. "Where exactly are we going?" he asked, trying to make sense of the situation. "To the ship," she said simply, not looking back. "They're waiting for me." "Who are they?" Michael asked, still confused. "People who will help me, but I have to get there fast." "Please don't ask questions." Michael nodded, deciding not to press her for more details. Whatever was going on, it was clear she wasn't going to explain everything. She was in a hurry, and so was he. As they reached the outskirts of town, Michael saw a large, metallic object in the distance, an imposing, dark shape hovering above the ground. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its sleek, shiny surface reflected the sunlight as if it were made of some kind of alien metal. It didn't make any noise, but Michael could feel its presence. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the ship was much closer than he had anticipated. The girl walked confidently toward it, glancing back at Michael. "Hurry," she urged. He followed, his mind racing. He had no idea what this ship was or why the girl needed him, but there was no turning back now. As they approached the ship, a tall, imposing figure stepped forward, an alien guard clad in dark armor. He had a stern expression, and his gaze swept over them both, lingering on Michael for a moment longer than necessary. The girl stepped forward and spoke in a language Michael didn't understand, her voice calm but firm. The guard said something in return, but the girl shook her head and turned to Michael. "Tell him," she said quickly. "Tell him you're my father, they'll let us on." Michael felt his heart racing. This was it. He could either lie and help her get on the ship, or he could walk away and never know what would have happened. He hesitated for a split second before stepping forward. "I'm her father," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling in his head. "She's with me." The guard stared at him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded once, stepping aside. The girl smiled up at Michael, relief flooding her face. "Thank you," she whispered again. Michael didn't have time to think about what had just happened. The guard motioned for them to enter the ship. With one last glance at the quiet town behind them, Michael followed the girl inside. He had no idea what awaited him, but he was already in too deep to back out now. Michael stepped into the ship, his heart still racing from the strange encounter. As soon as he crossed the threshold, the door closed behind him with a soft hiss. The interior was unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek metallic walls that seemed to pulse with a soft light. The air was cool, and the scent was unfamiliar, a mix of something sharp and clean. It felt otherworldly, as though the ship itself was alive, breathing in sync with its passengers. The alien girl, Zara, moved swiftly down a corridor, her movements graceful and fluid. Michael followed closely behind, trying to take in his surroundings without being too obvious. The ship was large, much larger than he had expected. It wasn't a simple transport vessel. It looked more like a fortress, built for something much bigger than just travel. The walls were lined with strange symbols and glowing panels, which Michael couldn't understand. Everything seemed to have a purpose, even if he couldn't figure it out. "Where are we going?" Michael asked, his voice low as he tried to catch up with Zara. "To the command center," she replied without slowing down. "We need to talk to the captain." Michael nodded, but his mind was filled with questions. Who was this captain? And why did Zara need to speak with them so urgently? He had no idea what he was doing here, and yet he couldn't seem to turn back now. They reached a set of heavy doors at the end of the corridor. Zara stopped and pressed a panel on the wall. The doors slid open silently, revealing a large room filled with people, most of them alien, like Zara, though they all looked very different. Some were tall and imposing, with long limbs and sharp features. Others were smaller, with smooth, almost translucent skin. They were all busy at work, moving between stations and screens, speaking in a language Michael couldn't understand. Zara walked straight into the center of the room, where a tall figure stood watching them approach. The figure was dressed in a long, dark cloak, their face obscured by a hood. Zara didn't hesitate. She approached the figure with a determined step. "Captain," she said, her voice steady, "I'm here." The captain lifted their head, revealing a face unlike any Michael had ever seen. The eyes were large and bright, glowing faintly, while the skin had an almost metallic sheen. The captain regarded Zara for a moment before speaking. "You've made it," the captain said in a deep, commanding voice. "But at what cost?" Zara bowed her head slightly, a sign of respect, but there was a hint of sadness in her expression. "I had no choice. They were getting closer. I couldn't stay on Earth any longer." Michael stood a few steps behind, watching the exchange in silence. He felt out of place, like an outsider in a world he didn't understand. He glanced around the room at the other aliens, all of them focused on their tasks. None of them paid him much attention, but he could feel their eyes on him occasionally. He wondered what they thought of him, a human, walking through their ship as if it were nothing. The captain turned to Michael then, their glowing eyes narrowing as they assessed him. "And who is this?" the captain asked, their voice colder than before. "He's the one who helped me," Zara said quickly, stepping closer to Michael. "He's my ally." Michael tensed at the word ally. He had never signed up to be an ally to anyone, especially not to someone he didn't know. But here he was, standing in the middle of an alien ship with a girl who seemed to be at the center of something much larger than him. The captain studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Very well," the captain said. "He'll have to stay for now." Michael felt a wave of unease wash over him. "Stay," he repeated, his voice thick with confusion. "I don't even know why I'm here. I'm just trying to get back to my normal life." Zara looked at him, her expression softening. "I understand, but you're already involved, Michael. You helped me, and now you'll have to help us." Before Michael could respond, the captain spoke again. "Zara is a fugitive," they said, their voice heavy with gravity. She was once part of an important diplomatic faction on her home planet, but her people have turned against her. They see her as a threat. Now she is a target for anyone who wishes to silence her. Michael's heart skipped a beat. A fugitive? He asked, his voice rising in shock. But she's just a girl. Why would anyone want to hurt her? The captain's eyes flashed with something Michael couldn't quite interpret. Because she knows too much, the captain said. And because she's the key to something far more important than even she realizes. Zara stood silent, her hands clasped together in front of her. She looked as though she was carrying the weight of the universe on her shoulders. Michael could see the burden in her eyes, the way she seemed to have aged in the short time they had been together. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Michael asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "Why didn't you explain what was going on? What's really happening here?" Zara looked up at him then, her face filled with regret. "I couldn't tell you everything, Michael," she said softly. "I didn't know who I could trust. I didn't know if I could trust you, but now I don't have a choice." The room fell silent as Michael processed her words. He had no idea what kind of danger he had just stepped into, but it was clear now that his life was never going to be the same. He couldn't just walk away, not after everything that had happened. He had already crossed a line, and there was no going back. The captain turned away from them and walked to a console on the far side of the room. They typed in a series of commands, and the screens around the room came to life, displaying a map of stars and planets. "We need to move quickly," the captain said, their voice grim. "The enemies we are facing are closing in. If we don't leave now, it will be too late." Zara stepped forward, her resolve firm once again. "Then let's go," she said. "I'm ready." Michael stood still for a moment, trying to grasp the enormity of the situation. Everything had changed so quickly. One minute he was a simple guy living in a quiet town, and the next he was standing on an alien spaceship, surrounded by strangers, about to embark on a journey he couldn't possibly understand. But there was no turning back now. He had already promised to help her, and now he had to see it through. "All right," Michael said, his voice steady. "Let's go." The captain nodded once, and the crew sprang into action, moving with purpose as the ship hummed to life around them. Michael followed Zara, who walked ahead with a new sense of purpose. The unknown stretched out before them, and as the ship began to move, Michael could feel the weight of everything that had brought him here pressing down on his shoulders. There was no going back. All he could do now was move forward. Michael felt the ship's engines hum beneath his feet as they continued their journey through the endless void of space. The walls around him seemed to close in as he followed Zara and the rest of the crew down long, narrow corridors. He had never imagined that his life would lead to something like this, being inside an alien ship, racing through space, with nothing but questions and uncertainty ahead. Zara moved with purpose, her posture straight, her expression focused. She seemed at ease in this place, as though she had been here before, like this was her home. Michael couldn't help but wonder about her past, the things she wasn't telling him, the things she couldn't. There was so much about her life that didn't add up. Why was she really a fugitive? What had she been involved in, and what was this mission she kept talking about? "Are you all right?" Zara's voice broke through his thoughts, and he looked up to see her glancing back at him. He nodded, though his mind was still racing. "Yeah, I'm fine, just trying to take it all in." Zara offered a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's a lot to process, I know, but you're not alone. We'll figure this out together." Michael wasn't sure if that was supposed to reassure him, but somehow it did. She had said the words with such certainty, and for a moment he felt like he wasn't just a bystander in this crazy situation. He was part of it now. They reached a large room at the end of the corridor, and Zara led him inside. It was a control room, filled with advanced technology and several crew members working at different stations. The atmosphere was tense, and Michael could sense the weight of their mission pressing down on everyone. The captain was standing near a central console, scanning a holographic map of the galaxy. When they saw Zara, they turned and nodded, acknowledging her presence. "Is everything ready?" Zara asked, her voice steady, though Michael could hear the underlying tension. The captain gave a quick nod. "We're prepared. The coordinates are set, but we'll have to move fast." "Good," Zara replied, her face hardening. "We can't afford any delays. We need to reach the outer rim before they catch up with us." Michael watched the exchange in silence, still trying to make sense of everything. "Who's chasing you?" he asked, his voice low. Zara turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "It's a group from my home planet. They've been hunting me for months." I was part of a faction that wanted to change things, make things better, but the people in power don't like change. They see me as a threat. Michael frowned, trying to understand. What did you do? What kind of change were you trying to make? Zara hesitated before answering. I was part of a peace initiative. We were trying to end a war that had been tearing our people apart, but the leaders didn't want peace. They wanted control, so they betrayed us. Now they're hunting down anyone who was involved. Michael's mind was spinning. He had never imagined anything like this. A war, betrayal, factions, none of it seemed real, but the seriousness in Zara's eyes told him it was. So what now? What happens when you get to the outer rim? We're going to find the rest of our allies, Zara said, her tone firm. We have to regroup, find a way to stop them before it's too late. The captain stepped forward, a sense of urgency in their voice. We need to act quickly. If they catch us in this sector, it'll be over before we even reach our destination. Zara nodded. I know. That's why we're moving out now. The crew began to prepare for the next phase of their journey. Zara walked over to a nearby console, inputting commands with swift precision. Michael stood back, unsure of what to do, but watching closely as the crew moved in unison. Everything they did had a purpose, a clear focus. It was almost like they had been doing this for a long time. As the ship's engines powered up once more, Zara turned to Michael. Stay here, she said. We'll need you when we get to the coordinates. Just stay safe for now. Michael nodded, though he wasn't sure how much, staying safe, he could do on a ship full of aliens with a mission so dangerous. But he had no choice but to trust Zara. She had brought him this far, and he didn't know how to get off the ship even if he wanted to. The journey stretched on, and Michael found himself wandering the ship, trying to keep out of the way as much as possible. The crew was constantly moving, checking systems, updating charts, making preparations for whatever was coming next. Every now and then, someone would glance at him, their expressions unreadable, but no one seemed to speak to him directly. It was like he was invisible, just another human on an alien ship. After what felt like hours, Zara found him again. This time, she didn't speak immediately. She just looked at him, her expression soft but serious. You're not just a bystander anymore, she said quietly. You've seen too much. You're part of this now, whether you like it or not. I need you to understand that. Michael didn't know how to respond. He had been thinking about it for a while, and he realized she was right. He couldn't just pretend to be a bystander anymore. He was already in this too deep. I understand, he said, his voice steady. But I don't know what to do. I've never been part of something like this. I'm just a regular guy. Zara stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. You don't need to be anything more than that. You're here because you've already done something. You helped me, and that's enough. Michael looked at her, seeing something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before, something soft, something human. She was scared, just like him, even if she didn't show it. We'll get through this, Zara continued. Together. Before Michael could reply, the ship's alarms went off, loud and piercing, echoing through the walls. Everyone on the ship froze. The crew rushed to their stations, eyes wide with alarm. Zara immediately ran to the nearest console. What is it? She asked, her voice sharp. Contact, one of the crew members reported. They've found us. The pursuers are close. Michael's stomach twisted with fear. He had no idea who these pursuers were or what they would do if they caught up to them. But it was clear now that everything had just gotten a lot more dangerous. Zara's face hardened as she glanced at Michael. Get ready, it's time. Michael felt a cold rush of fear, but he nodded. There was no going back now. Whatever was ahead, he had to face it. He had already stepped into this world, and there was no turning around. The alarms continued to blare, echoing through the corridors of the ship. Michael stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been in a situation like this before, and every instinct in his body told him to run, to escape. But he knew there was nowhere to go. The ship was surrounded, and whatever was coming for them was far beyond anything he could handle alone. Zara's face was set in a hard, determined expression as she moved quickly through the control room, her hands flying over the console. She barked orders to the crew, her voice sharp and commanding, but Michael could see the tension in her shoulders, the worry in her eyes. She wasn't as calm as she tried to appear. We need to move, Zara said urgently. If they get too close, we won't make it. The captain stepped forward, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the room. Zara's right, we need to accelerate. If they catch up with us now, we're dead. The words hit Michael like a punch in the gut. The reality of the situation was sinking in. These weren't just enemies, they were killers, and Zara had brought him into this world, this fight, without giving him a choice. "What can I do?" Michael asked, his voice shaky. He didn't know what kind of help he could offer, but he had to try. Zara glanced at him, her face softening for a brief moment. "I know you're scared, Michael, but you have to trust me. You've already done more than I could have asked. Now we need to stick together." Before Michael could respond, a loud thud shook the ship. The lights flickered, and the hum of the engines seemed to stutter before returning to a steady rhythm. "They're firing on us," one of the crew members shouted. "Shields are holding, but they won't last much longer." Zara's face tightened. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We need to get out of this sector now." Michael's heart raced as the crew moved with practiced speed, following Zara's commands. He could barely keep up, his mind still reeling from the shock of the situation. He had gone from an ordinary guy living in a small town to being caught in the middle of an intergalactic chase. And now, it seemed like they were on the verge of a battle for their lives. He followed Zara to another part of the ship, deeper into its heart. As they walked, she glanced over at him, her expression serious. "You're doing fine," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Stay close to me, don't get separated." Michael nodded, trying to keep calm. The corridors of the ship seemed to stretch endlessly, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Every step he took felt heavier than the last. They reached a large bay at the rear of the ship. Inside, there were several small ships, similar to the one Michael had seen earlier, each one sleek and equipped for combat. Zara led him to one of them, her hands steady as she began to power up the systems. "This is our best shot," she said, her voice low but filled with urgency. "We'll break through the blockade with this, but we'll need to move fast. I'll need your help." Michael looked at her, his mind still trying to catch up with the situation. "How can I help?" "I've never flown one of these things." Zara smiled briefly, a flicker of humor in her eyes. "You won't have to fly it, just sit tight and follow my instructions. I need you to keep the systems online and make sure nothing gets interrupted." Michael nodded, unsure of himself but willing to do whatever it took. As Zara settled into the pilot's seat, he took the station beside her. The ship hummed to life, the soft lights flickering as the systems powered up. "We're going to need a distraction," Zara said, her eyes focused on the control panel. "You'll need to activate the emergency protocols as soon as we break through the blockade. That should confuse them long enough for us to escape." Michael didn't fully understand the technical details, but he trusted her. He could see the determination in her eyes. She knew what she was doing. He glanced around the small cockpit, trying to take in the unfamiliar equipment. The controls looked complicated, but Zara had already explained the basics. His job was simple: keep things running and follow her lead. Another loud thud shook the ship, followed by a series of smaller tremors. The ship's lights flickered, and the hum of the engines became erratic. "They're getting closer," Zara said, her voice steady, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. "Brace yourself." Michael took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He had never been in a situation like this before. He had never even dreamed of being involved in a space battle. But here he was, about to help Zara escape from enemies who wanted her dead. The ship jolted again as it lurched forward, accelerating at a speed Michael could barely comprehend. Outside, through the small viewport, he could see the stars blur as they moved faster and faster. Then, without warning, the ship veered sharply to the side. Michael grabbed onto the armrests as the sudden movement sent him sliding slightly to the left. "We're breaking through," Zara said, her voice sharp and focused. "Hold on." The sound of laser fire echoed from behind them as the enemy ships fired again, but Zara didn't slow down. She turned the ship with a skill that left Michael in awe. She was calm under pressure, completely in control of the situation. For a moment, Michael wondered if she had been through something like this before, if she had fought in battles like this one. But now wasn't the time to ask questions. He had to focus on what was happening right now. "Ready, Michael?" Zara asked, her eyes meeting his briefly. "This is it." Michael nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "Ready." Zara activated the emergency protocols, and the ship suddenly lurched again, this time in a different direction. A loud explosion rocked the hull of the ship, but they had already broken through the blockade. The sound of enemy fire faded behind them as Zara guided the ship toward open space. Michael let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. They had made it. For now, they were safe. But he knew this was only the beginning. They had escaped the immediate danger, but the real fight was still ahead of them. Zara's enemies weren't going to give up easily. "We're not out of the woods yet," Zara said, her voice calm but firm. "But we've got some time. Let's regroup and plan our next move." Michael nodded, his mind racing with everything that had just happened. He was still processing the chaos, the fear, the close calls. But one thing was clear, he was in this now. There was no turning back. As Zara piloted the ship into the safety of deep space, Michael sat back in his seat, trying to relax for the first time in what felt like forever. But his mind wouldn't stop. He couldn't help but think about what would happen next. What would Zara's enemies do? What would they do to him if they caught up? And more importantly, what would Zara do? She had already proven she was a survivor. But could she survive what was coming next? The ship's engines hummed steadily as they drifted further into deep space. The immediate danger was behind them, but Michael couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his chest. Every time he glanced out of the small viewport, all he saw was the vast, empty void stretching out before them. It was both calming and terrifying at the same time. Zara was seated at the pilot's controls, her focus intense as she navigated through the cold darkness. Her hands moved effortlessly over the ship's controls, her face a mask of concentration. Michael had watched her over the past few hours, amazed at how calm she seemed despite everything that had happened. It was as though she had lived through far worse than this, and whatever came next would be just another challenge to overcome. But Michael wasn't like her. He didn't have the experience, the training, or the skills to deal with the danger they were facing. He was just a regular guy, thrown into a world he didn't understand, and the weight of that reality was starting to sink in. "Zara," he said, his voice tentative as he walked up to where she sat. "Where are we going? What's the plan now?" Zara didn't look at him immediately. She adjusted a few more settings on the control panel, her expression unreadable. After a moment she spoke, her voice low but steady. "We're heading to a safe house, one of the last places they won't be able to track us, but it's not going to be easy to get there. We're still in danger, Michael. The people chasing me won't stop until they find me." Michael nodded, though his heart was racing. He had heard the determination in her voice, but there was something else too, a hint of fear. Zara wasn't invincible, no matter how much she tried to act like she was. He couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility for her now. When he first met her, he had no idea what he was getting into. He had thought it would be a quick favor, helping some lost alien girl get on a spaceship. But now, after everything they had been through together, it was clear that he was involved in something much bigger than he could have imagined. "What happens when we get there?" Michael asked, his voice quieter this time. "What's the safe house like?" Zara's eyes softened slightly as she glanced over at him. "It's a hidden base, a place where I can lay low, regroup, and plan my next move. I'm not sure how long we can stay, but it's the only option we have right now. If we don't get there soon, we'll be caught." Michael swallowed, trying to process everything. "You said you're a fugitive. What's really going on, Zara? I mean, why are they after you? What did you do?" Zara didn't answer right away. Her gaze turned back to the controls, but Michael could see her jaw tighten. For a moment, the silence between them was thick with unspoken words, and he could feel the weight of her secret hanging in the air. Finally, Zara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was part of a movement, a group that wanted to end the war on my home planet. We wanted peace, but the people in power saw us as a threat. So they turned on us. They betrayed us, and now they're hunting down everyone who was involved. They think I'm the key to everything, everything they've built, everything they control. And they'll stop at nothing to find me." Michael didn't know what to say. He had heard the pain in her voice, the hurt that ran deeper than any of the physical wounds she might have suffered. She wasn't just running from people who wanted to capture her. She was running from her own past, from a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade ever could. He didn't know how to help her, but he knew one thing: he couldn't just stand by and watch her suffer. Not after everything she had done for him, everything she had risked. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "You're not alone, Zara," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not leaving you, not now." Zara looked up at him then, her eyes softening as she met his gaze. For a moment there was silence again, but this time it was a comfortable silence. A quiet understanding passed between them, and Michael could see the faintest hint of a smile tug at the corner of Zara's lips. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Michael gave a small nod, unsure of what to say. The truth was, he didn't know what was going to happen next. He didn't know if they would make it to the safe house or if they would be caught before they got there. But he knew one thing for sure: they would face it together. As they continued on their journey, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie with Zara. She had been through so much, and yet she still fought on, never giving up. She wasn't just a fugitive anymore. She was someone he cared about, someone he wanted to protect. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines. Michael had never realized how vast and empty space could feel until now. The stars outside the viewport looked so distant, so unreachable, like little sparks of light in an endless sea of darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zara's voice broke the silence again. "We're almost there," she said, her tone more focused now. "Stay close." "We'll land soon." Michael nodded, his heart beginning to race again. He wasn't sure what to expect when they reached the safe house, but he knew that whatever happened, they had to stick together. There was no other option. The ship slowly decelerated, and Michael could feel the slight shift in gravity as they began their descent. Zara's hands moved expertly over the controls, guiding the ship with practiced ease. Michael's breath caught in his throat as they approached what looked like a small, isolated planet. It wasn't much. A rocky world with no signs of civilization, just barren land and a few scattered mountains in the distance. "This is it," Zara said quietly. "This is where we'll hide." She landed the ship smoothly on the rocky surface, and Michael's hands gripped the armrests as they touched down. The ship's engines hummed to a stop, and a heavy silence settled over them. Zara powered down the systems and stood up from her seat, turning to face Michael. "We need to be careful. The moment we step outside, we'll be exposed. Stay close and don't make any noise." Michael stood, his legs stiff from the long journey, but his mind was alert, ready for whatever came next. He followed Zara as she moved toward the exit, her movements swift and silent. As she opened the hatch, Michael stepped outside for the first time since they had boarded the ship. The air was cold and thin, and the ground beneath them was rough and uneven. Zara led the way, her eyes scanning the horizon as they moved cautiously toward a small, hidden entrance carved into the rock. Michael followed closely, trying to stay as quiet as possible, though every step felt like it echoed in the silence of the desolate planet. When they finally reached the entrance, Zara stopped and turned to face him. "We'll be safe here for now," she said. "But this is just the beginning. We'll need to plan our next move. The war isn't over and we're not out of danger yet." Michael nodded, his heart heavy with the knowledge that this was just the start of a much bigger fight. But whatever came next, he was ready to face it with Zara by his side. He had already stepped into this world, and there was no turning back now. They stepped into the darkness together, knowing that the journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but they would face it together. And that somehow made everything a little less terrifying.